Darren Hubbis here at Par 4 Fitness. I am joined by Dr. Shannon Reese of Training for Optimal Performance. You'll see her multiple times throughout our webinar series. We've done a lot of things together in the past, but I'm excited to bring her on today to talk about amateur golfers versus professional golfers, taking away some mental tips that you can apply right away to your game. And I know this is something that we always talked about, and we did a recent webinar on mental approach to training in the gym, off the course versus on the course. And I think this ties in nicely, comparing amateurs versus professional players and what we see.
Absolutely. It's a great topic, Darren. I'm so excited to be here. So let's jump right in and give your audience some awesomeness.
Excellent. So what are some of the most common things? And I know you have these 5 performance areas that we like to fill in. And for me, on the performance side, I also have these boxes as well. So we like to check those off when we're training. And if we're not filling up each of these buckets, then it's hard to reach our maximum performance level.
Absolutely. What I see so often with my amateur golf clients is that they take a very segmented approach to their game, and they tend to work on and really invest a lot of time, effort, energy, and even money in the one thing that they think is causing them the most pain in that moment. And so they just kind of focus everything on trying to fix that one thing, whether it's their swing mechanics or it's a physical limitation, a back issue, or restriction in their body, or something like that. Or sometimes they come to me because they've tried everything else, but they haven't tried the mental game. And the big difference between the amateur and the professional golfer is that the professional golfer knows the importance of investing in all 5 performance areas at the same time. And so those include the mental side of the game, the technical side of the game, the physical side of the game, your strategy, your strategic approach to the game, and then your overall well-being. So that kind of encompasses the health and nutrition side of things. And they really focus on all those things. And the one thing I want to point out, if that's like scaring somebody right now and they're thinking, as an amateur, I would never do that, I'm not that serious, is that I'm not talking about you needing to train 8 hours a day to cover all those bases, but to just do simple things that help you enhance each of those 5 areas so that you don't have a deficit, because all of those need to work together in concert. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Darren. In order for people to really reach the maximum level of excellence in their game, you can't have a hole somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that's easy to compare to one another on the major tours, like the PGA Tour, the LPGA Tour, is they've got stats at every single level. So they know exactly where they stand in comparison to the other players. Now, us as amateur players, it's kind of a guessing game. Like we kind of know what our weaknesses are, and we watch the Golf Channel, and maybe like I pick up on a couple tips, or I see that hot new driver that's out, I'm going to pick up 10 more yards in addition to the 10 yards that I should have gained with the last driver I bought. And we end up, I think, more frustrated because players don't know exactly what to work on. But if they can understand and kind of compare themselves to PGA Tour stats, and that's something that I've even recommended too, is in your practice, see if you can get up and down 6 or 7 out of 10 times from different lies, and that way you can build, and that way you have a goal and you're working towards that goal. So filling up those boxes, I think it's important to know exactly what your goal and objective is in each of those boxes as well, right?
Absolutely. And it doesn't take, working with somebody, tons of hours every week and, spending gobs and gobs of money, whether it's me or Darren or a swing coach or whatever. But it's really having that go-to expert that you can tap into, whether you just are following their newsletter, or you have, met with Darren and, gotten a maintenance training plan just to make sure that you don't do any backsliding in any areas. And I offer, something similar. And plus, I know we both put out a ton of high value free content in an effort to assist golfers in keeping some of the most important things top of mind that they can be doing on their own.
Right, right. So it's managing your time and knowing what to work on at what points. And I say for a professional player, there's in season and off season time. So your training is going to be different based on the time of the year. So for our players up north during the winter, they're not playing too much. So it's a great time to work on the mental side of things, work on the physical side of things. That way, when spring rolls around, they're ready to go play any sport, not just golf. But they've made some strides to improvement along the way while they're not on the golf course.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing that is so sad are the golfers who, kind of take this resigned attitude that, well, my season's over, so now I hang up the clubs and my shoes, and I'll just hope that I don't lose too much ground by the time the next season rolls around. And so their activities dramatically change, which they don't need to. I mean, the only thing that should really change is where you work on your swing, essentially. But everything else should, to some degree, stay intact, and you move into, more of a maintenance program, or you move into a distinctly set aside training phase, because you are in your off season, and that applies to golfers who do golf all year round as well. So during the high season for them, they want to be more focused on playing the game and how to support better play. Whereas in the summer season, where there isn't so much competitive play, that's when they have an opportunity for a sprint training phase or a longer term training phase in any of these 5 discipline areas. So
right, and I think it's important to educate the player that we're working with on the importance of each of those phases, because I know it's hard to keep them going if they're 5 months out from their next tournament or the club championship or their member guest. And it's easy to end up a month out and you haven't done anything to better yourself, and then you're cramming for the test, right?
yep.
And that's something that I'm sure you maybe see or have experienced yourself in the past as well. So what are some of the obstacles that you find working with people in the off season, particularly maybe professionals?
Well, with professional golfers, they can sometimes, this isn't the case for all of them, some are really disciplined because they've worked to become disciplined. But there are a number of players who tend to kind of allow things to get a little lax, even just around the mental side of the game. And they don't always see the importance of keeping those skills sharp, sharpen that sword all year round, even though you're not playing competitively. And one way that they can go about doing this, and amateurs can do this as well, is even if you don't have a multi-day event coming up, why not put one on the calendar that you ramp up for that's a simulated tournament round? I was on the phone with one of my professional golfers earlier this week, and we were talking about this because, the tours are on pause right now. And, there is a date that they've put out there. And so we have organized his schedule between now and then to begin to ramp him up and transition him from training mode back into trust and play mode. And he has on the calendar a 4-day event. It's a simulated event, and he will likely be playing by himself, but virtually he will be competing against, 3 other golfers, 3 other peers who will be playing on their own course. But that's kind of an accountability measure that we put in place so that he could feel that sort of intensity and that drive to work up to being ready for game day.
Right, and even something that you see right now, because everybody's inside is a sport like NASCAR is doing these virtual driving and virtual races, and it's keeping their skills sharp for when they get back onto the racetrack. Something that kind of leads us into our next point of amateurs and their way of approaching working, whether that's practice or working out or working on their mental game versus the professional player. What do you see as the differences between the two in comparison?
So the amateur golfer tends to focus on working really, really hard, right? And they put in, like if they don't feel like they're making advances, they put in more time, more reps, more ball strikes, more rounds, whatever it is. And that in and of itself, the time and checking a box isn't going to get the job done. That's not going to really move the performance needle in their game the way that it could. The difference between them and an amateur or a professional golfer is that a professional golfer is very purpose-driven, is very, much accustomed to long-term planning. So they set goals at the end, for each calendar year, and then they reverse engineer their plan that they need to execute to get to that end goal. And so they're very strategic, they're very purpose-driven, and when they have a golf club in their hand, or they're in the gym, or they're working on their mental game, there is distinct, mapped out purpose for that activity, and there are measurables in place so that they know that they're getting a return on their investment. And so that's kind of that big difference between the amateur and the professional player when it comes to working on their game. The amateurs tend to work hard, the professionals tend to work smart.
Right, and I think quality coaching comes from being able to evaluate and give objective measurements to the players. So on my end, whether it's flexibility or strength measures or speed outputs, whereas your end, you've got your set of metrics there as well. So they know exactly where they stand in that box. So they know where to work on and what to work on. So it's important to set aside those boxes, maybe write them down and see where you stand in each set of those categories. So you've got your swing coach, maybe you've got someone like myself, and you've got the mental side of things as well. Maybe your club fitter. So you can see where all of those metrics stand. And I know something that you've got out right now is a guide. Think like a great golfer to play like one.
Yes. And that guide centers all around your golf identity. And the reason that I felt the need to write this free guide was because I have people come to me all the time who are struggling with their confidence, and they find that it goes up and down as they play the game depending on how they're actually performing. And golf identity is so intimately tied to your confidence that, and it's the origin point for all performance. So how you think about yourself as a player and about your game as a whole will have a direct and dramatic impact on how you actually do perform, especially when you experience a struggle or something unexpected happens in a round. That golf identity has to be rock solid because that is your confidence foundation. So for any golfer who's watching this and feels that they struggle with low levels of confidence from time to time, they're often driven by situations that they encounter out on the golf course. You're going about it the wrong way, and that's a true sign that your golf identity is not where we want it to be.
Excellent. I think that's a great resource for any of our listeners throughout this time to pick that up and give that free guide a read. And we'll include that link in this video description as well. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me today, Shannon. I really appreciate it. We'll do this again.
It was my pleasure, Darren.